In the beginning, when the world was young and the boundaries between divine realms remained fluid, there existed forces so ancient and powerful that even the gods themselves trembled before their influence. Tonight, as you settle into the embrace of sleep, allow me to guide you through the extraordinary tale of Athena, the gray-eyed goddess whose wisdom shaped the very foundations of civilization itself. This is not merely a story of divine birth or heroic deeds, but rather an intricate tapestry woven from the threads of wisdom, warfare, and the complex relationships that bind both mortals and immortals together. As your breathing deepens and your mind begins its gentle journey toward rest, let these ancient words carry you through landscapes of marble temples and olive groves, where the scent of burning incense mingles with the salt spray of the Aegean Sea. The story of Athena begins not with her birth, but with a prophecy that would shake Mount Olympus to its very core and set in motion events that would reshape the divine hierarchy forever. Zeus, the thunder bearer and king of the gods, had learned from the ancient fates themselves that his first wife, the Titaness Metis, would bear him a child whose wisdom would rival his own. But the prophecy carried within it a terrible warning, one that would haunt the king of the gods and drive him to an act of desperation that would echo through eternity. The Fates, those three ancient sisters who spin the threads of destiny itself, had spoken with voices that carried the weight of absolute truth. They revealed that Metis would indeed bear Zeus, a daughter of extraordinary wisdom and power, but that this same goddess would later give birth to a son whose strength and authority would surpass even Zeus himself. This son, the prophecy declared, would overthrow his father just as Zeus had overthrown Kronos, and Kronos had overthrown Uranus before him, continuing the endless cycle of divine succession that had plagued the cosmos since time immemorial. The knowledge of this prophecy filled Zeus with a dread that penetrated deeper than the darkest depths of Tartarus itself. He had fought too hard and sacrificed too much to claim his throne among the clouds to allow it to slip away through the machinations of fate. The memory of his own rebellion against his father Kronos remained fresh in his divine consciousness, and he understood better than anyone the terrible power that could be wielded by a son determined to claim his birthright through force. Metis herself was no ordinary goddess, but rather embodied the very essence of prudent counsel and wise deliberation. Her intelligence was so profound that even Zeus, despite his supreme authority over the heavens, regularly sought her guidance when faced with particularly complex divine disputes or cosmic crises. She possessed the rare ability to perceive the long-term consequences of actions that might seem beneficial in the immediate present, and her advice had proven invaluable during Zeus's successful campaign against the Titans. The relationship between Zeus and Metis had blossomed during those dark years of the Titanomachy, when the younger generation of gods had struggled against their elders for control of the universe itself. Metis had chosen to side with Zeus and his siblings, recognizing that the old order, represented by Kronos and the other Titans, had become corrupt and stagnant. Her strategic brilliance had contributed significantly to the Olympian victory, particularly through her creation of the potion that had forced Kronos to regurgitate Zeus's siblings, thereby providing the young god with the allies he needed to challenge his father's rule. As Zeus contemplated the terrible prophecy that threatened his future reign, he found himself torn between his genuine affection for Metis and his overwhelming need to preserve his position as king of the gods. The solution he devised was as cunning as it was ruthless, reflecting both his strategic intelligence and his willingness to employ deception when circumstances demanded such measures. Rather than confronting the problem directly through conflict or negotiation, Zeus chose to eliminate the threat through a method that would ensure his continued dominance while ostensibly honoring his relationship with the Titaness. The plan Zeus conceived required careful timing and masterful manipulation of Metis's own trusting nature. He approached his wife with apparent warmth and affection, suggesting that they engage in a playful contest that would demonstrate their respective shape-shifting abilities. Such contests were common among the gods, serving both as entertainment and as displays of divine power that reinforced hierarchies and relationships within the pantheon. Metis, unsuspecting of her husband's true intentions and confident in her own transformative abilities, agreed to participate in what she believed would be an innocent diversion. The contest began with both deities assuming various forms, each more impressive and complex than the last. Zeus transformed himself into a magnificent eagle, his golden feathers gleaming like burnished bronze in the divine light that perpetually illuminated Mount Olympus. Metis responded by becoming a sleek dolphin, her silver skin reflecting the ethereal radiance that surrounded the thrones of the gods. The competition continued with increasingly elaborate transformations, as Zeus became a roaring lion, while Metis took the form of a serpent whose scales shimmered with all the colors of the rainbow. Finally, Zeus suggested that the ultimate test of shape-shifting ability would be to assume the most compact form possible, arguing that true mastery lay not in creating impressive displays of size and power, but rather in demonstrating complete control over one's essential divine nature. Metis, her competitive spirit fully engaged, and her pride in her transformative abilities overriding any potential suspicion, eagerly accepted this final challenge. She concentrated her vast consciousness and divine essence, compressing her being until she had assumed the form of a single drop of crystalline water. In that moment of ultimate vulnerability, when Metis had reduced herself to her most concentrated essence, Zeus struck with the swiftness of lightning itself. He opened his mouth and swallowed the droplet that contained his wife's entire being, absorbing her wisdom, her power, and most crucially, the unborn child she carried within her divine womb. The act was completed so quickly that even Metis, despite her legendary intelligence, had no opportunity to perceive the deception or defend herself against her husband's betrayal. The immediate aftermath of this consumption created unprecedented changes within Zeus's own divine physiology and consciousness. As Metis's essence merged with his own, the king of the gods found himself possessed of wisdom and strategic insight that far exceeded his previous capabilities. Her knowledge became his knowledge. Her prudent counsel became an internal voice that would guide his decisions throughout his eternal reign. The merger was so complete that Zeus retained access to all of Metis's memories and experiences, effectively doubling his understanding of cosmic law and divine politics. However, the absorption of Metis did not eliminate the prophesied child, but merely transferred the pregnancy to Zeus himself in a manner that defied all natural and divine precedent. The unborn goddess continued to develop within her father's body, growing in power and wisdom as the months passed. This unprecedented situation created physical and psychological complications for Zeus that no god had ever experienced before, as his body struggled to accommodate a pregnancy it was never designed to sustain. As the child within him continued to mature, Zeus began experiencing severe headaches that no amount of nectar or ambrosia could alleviate. These were not ordinary pains, but rather manifestations of the developing goddess's own divine consciousness as it pressed against the boundaries of its unnatural prison. The headaches grew more intense with each passing day, until they became so severe that Zeus found it difficult to concentrate on his royal duties or participate in the complex deliberations that governed Olympian society. The other gods watched their king's growing distress with a mixture of concern and curiosity, though none dared to question him directly about the source of his obvious suffering. Some suspected that Zeus had undertaken some secret, magical experiment that had produced unintended consequences, while others wondered if he might be experiencing the after effects of some cosmic conflict they had not witnessed. The truth of his condition remained hidden from all but Zeus himself, who bore his burden in silence while desperately seeking some means of relief. The pain reached its crescendo during a particularly important assembly of the gods, when Zeus was attempting to mediate a dispute between Poseidon and Apollo over territorial boundaries in the mortal world. As he listened to the competing arguments and weighed the merits of each god's claims, a sudden stabbing sensation pierced through his skull with such intensity that he cried out in agony, startling the assembled deities and temporarily halting all discussion of the matter at hand. Recognizing that his condition could no longer be concealed or endured, Zeus summoned Hephaestus, the divine smith whose mastery of metalwork and tool crafting was unparalleled throughout the cosmos. The limping god of the forge had inherited both artistic brilliance and practical engineering skills from his divine heritage, making him uniquely qualified to address problems that required both creative thinking and precise technical execution. Zeus, despite the waves of pain that continued to assault his consciousness, managed to convey to Hephaestus that he required immediate assistance with a medical emergency of the most unusual and urgent nature. Without asking questions about the specific circumstances that had created this unprecedented situation, Hephaestus retrieved his finest bronze axe from the divine armory and prepared to perform what would become one of the most significant surgical procedures in mythological history. The blade he selected had been forged from metals found only in the deepest caverns of Mount Olympus, tempered in the breath of dragons, and sharpened to an edge so fine that it could slice through divine flesh as easily as mortal steel cuts through silk. Through silk. The assembled gods fell into profound silence as Hephaestus raised the gleaming bronze axe above his father's divine head, the weapon catching and reflecting the eternal light that bathed Mount Olympus in its golden radiance. Even the winds that perpetually circled the sacred mountain seemed to pause in anticipation of what was to come, as if the very cosmos itself held its breath before this moment of unprecedented divine intervention. The air grew thick with tension as powerful deities who had witnessed the rise and fall of titans, the birth of stars, and the shaping of mortal destinies found themselves confronted with something entirely beyond their vast experience. Zeus, despite the excruciating pain that clouded his vision and made coherent thought nearly impossible, managed to steady himself upon his throne of polished ivory and gold. His mighty hands gripped the armrests with such force that hairline cracks appeared in the precious materials, testament to both his physical agony and the enormous effort required to maintain his composure before his divine subjects. The crown of stars that normally adorned his brow flickered and dimmed as waves of pain washed over him, each surge more intense than the last, as the developing consciousness within his skull pressed ever more urgently against its confines. Hephaestus positioned himself with the careful precision of a master craftsman approaching his most delicate work, understanding that a single miscalculation could result in consequences that would reverberate throughout the divine realm for countless ages. His own divine senses, honed through millennia of working with materials that existed nowhere else in creation, detected something extraordinary stirring within his father's head. The rhythmic pulsing he perceived spoke not of injury or disease, but of life itself, vibrant and powerful, seeking its destined emergence into the world of light and consciousness. With a movement as swift and decisive as lightning splitting the summer sky, Hephaestus brought the bronze axe down upon Zeus's skull. The blade passed through divine flesh and bone with surprising ease, as if the very substance of the thunder god's head had been preparing itself for this moment of liberation. The sound that echoed through the marble halls of Olympus was unlike anything the assembled gods had ever heard, combining the ring of metal striking divine essence with something that resembled the first cry of creation itself, echoing through the primordial void. From the cleft that opened in Zeus's forehead, there emerged first a brilliant light that outshone even the radiance of Helios at his noonday peak, forcing the mighty gods to shield their eyes against its overwhelming intensity. This was not ordinary illumination, but rather the visible manifestation of pure wisdom itself, concentrated into a luminescence so profound that it seemed to reveal the hidden truths underlying all of existence. The light pulsed and swirled with patterns that suggested vast intelligence, organizing itself into coherent form, preparing to assume physical manifestation within the material realm. As the divine radiance began to coalesce and take shape, there stepped forth from Zeus's opened head a figure of such magnificent bearing and terrible beauty that even the immortal gods found themselves struck speechless with awe. This was Athena, born not as an infant, requiring nurture and protection, but as a fully mature goddess whose very presence transformed the atmosphere of Mount Olympus itself. Her emergence was accompanied by a sound like the clash of bronze shields and the thunder of marching armies, announcing the arrival of a deity whose dominion would encompass both the strategic arts of warfare and the subtle complexities of civilized wisdom. The newly born goddess stood before the assembled pantheon, clothed in armor that seemed to have been woven from moonbeams and starlight, each plate and scale reflecting not merely the light that fell upon it, but the inner radiance of divine intelligence made manifest. Her helmet, crafted from materials that existed only in the realm of pure thought, bore a crest that moved with its own mysterious life, while her shield displayed symbols and patterns that shifted and changed as observers attempted to comprehend their meaning. In her right hand, She carried a spear whose point gleamed with an edge sharper than the boundary between truth and falsehood. Most striking of all were Athena's eyes, which held within their gray depths a quality of perception that seemed to penetrate beyond surface appearances to perceive the essential nature of all things. These were not merely organs of vision, but windows into a consciousness that could simultaneously comprehend the immediate details of any situation and the vast patterns of cause and consequence that connected all events across the span of eternity. When she turned her gaze upon the assembled gods, each felt as though their deepest thoughts and motivations had been laid bare before an intelligence that missed nothing and understood everything. The physical wound in Zeus's head healed instantly upon Athena's emergence, leaving no trace of the dramatic surgery that had brought her into the world. The king of the gods found himself not weakened by the experience, but rather strengthened and renewed, as if the act of giving birth to wisdom itself had enhanced his own divine nature. The terrible headaches that had plagued him vanished completely, replaced by a sense of clarity and purpose that seemed to flow directly from his daughter's presence in the world. Zeus rose from his throne with movements that spoke of restored vitality and divine authority, his eyes meeting those of his extraordinary daughter with a complex mixture of pride, relief, and something approaching reverence. Here stood the fulfillment of the prophecy that had caused him such fear, yet in a form that posed no threat to his continued reign. Athena's very nature as wisdom incarnate meant that she would serve not as a challenger to his authority, but as its most valuable supporter and advisor, bringing to the divine court a perspective that would enhance rather than undermine his rule. The goddess herself surveyed the assembly of her divine relatives with an expression of calm assessment, her consciousness already processing the complex web of relationships, rivalries, and alliances that characterized Olympian politics. She understood instinctively her place within this celestial hierarchy, recognizing both the privileges and responsibilities that came with her unique origin and extraordinary capabilities. Unlike other gods who had been born through conventional means and required time to discover their individual purposes, Athena emerged into existence with full knowledge of her destined role as guardian of civilization and patron of those mortals who sought to elevate themselves through wisdom and skill. Her first words, when she finally chose to speak, carried an authority that seemed to flow from the very foundations of cosmic order itself. She addressed Zeus not as a newly born child seeking guidance, but as an equal whose wisdom had been present since before creation began, merely waiting for the proper moment to assume physical form. Her voice possessed a quality that commanded attention without demanding it, conveying intelligence so profound that even the most cunning gods found themselves listening with unprecedented focus and respect. The impact of Athena's arrival upon the dynamics of Mount Olympus was immediate and far-reaching, as the established relationships between the various deities suddenly required recalibration in light of this new and formidable presence. Gods who had grown accustomed to their particular roles and spheres of influence found themselves confronted with a consciousness that seemed to understand their motivations and capabilities better than they understood themselves. Her wisdom was not theoretical knowledge gained through study or experience, but rather intuitive understanding that appeared to encompass all possible variations of divine and mortal behavior. Hera, Zeus's wife and queen of the gods, watched the emergence of this new goddess with emotions that shifted rapidly between curiosity, resentment, and grudging admiration. The circumstances of Athena's birth represented yet another reminder of her husband's infidelities and deceptions, born as she was from Zeus's union with Metis during a period when his marriage to Hera had already been established. Yet the undeniable magnificence of the newly emerged goddess, combined with her obvious lack of any challenge to Hera's position as queen, created a complex emotional response that would shape their future relationship in ways both subtle and profound. Poseidon, lord of the seas and Zeus's brother, recognized in Athena a potential rival whose domains might overlap with his own in ways that could create future conflicts. Her obvious mastery of strategic thinking and her natural authority suggested that she would likely seek to establish her own spheres of influence within both the divine and mortal realms. The Earthshaker's assessment of this new goddess was colored by his own competitive nature and his long-standing desire to expand his authority beyond the boundaries of his aquatic kingdom. Apollo, god of music, poetry, and prophecy, found himself intrigued by Athena's apparent ability to perceive truths that remained hidden from other consciousnesses. Her wisdom seemed to complement his own prophetic abilities while operating according to entirely different principles, suggesting possibilities for both collaboration and competition that would require careful navigation. The sun god's appreciation for intellectual excellence made him naturally inclined to respect Athena's obvious capabilities, even as his pride in his own divine gifts made him wary of potential challenges to his established preeminence in matters of foresight and revelation. Artemis, the huntress goddess who valued independence and self-sufficiency above all other virtues, saw in Athena a kindred spirit who had emerged into existence fully formed and capable, requiring neither protection nor guidance from established authority figures. The two goddesses shared a natural affinity for competence and achievement that would eventually develop into one of the stronger alliances within the Olympian pantheon, though their different approaches to wielding power would occasionally create tensions that required careful management. As the initial shock of Athena's dramatic birth began to subside, the assembled gods gradually returned to their normal activities, though conversations throughout the divine realm would focus on little else for many days to come. Speculation about the new goddess's intended role within the pantheon, her likely areas of influence, and her potential impact on established traditions provided endless material for divine gossip and political calculation. Some gods welcomed the addition of such obvious wisdom and capability to their ranks, while others worried about how her presence might disrupt the delicate balance of power that had maintained relative stability since the conclusion of the Titanomachy. Athena herself remained serenely indifferent to the undercurrents of speculation and political maneuvering that her arrival had triggered among her divine relatives. Her consciousness, vast and encompassing, processed these reactions with the detached interest of a scholar observing the behavior of fascinating but ultimately predictable subjects. She understood that her unique circumstances of birth and her evident capabilities would naturally create ripples throughout the established order, but she felt no compulsion to either accelerate or resist these inevitable changes. Time would reveal the true scope of her influence, and patience was merely another aspect of wisdom properly applied. The gray-eyed goddess devoted her initial days upon Mount Olympus to careful observation and systematic study of her new environment. She walked through the marble corridors and golden halls with the measured pace of one who sought to understand not merely the physical layout of the divine palace, but the deeper patterns of behavior and relationship that gave meaning to its elaborate architecture. Every conversation she overheard, every gesture she witnessed, every subtle exchange of glances between the various gods contributed to her growing comprehension of the complex social dynamics that governed celestial society. Her methodical approach to learning impressed even those deities who had initially viewed her arrival with suspicion or concern. Unlike other gods who might have sought immediate recognition or attempted to establish their authority through dramatic displays of power, Athena demonstrated the patience of true intelligence, gathering information and building understanding before taking any decisive action. This restraint was itself a form of power, creating an aura of potential that proved more compelling than any overt demonstration of her capabilities might have been. The goddess established her residence in chambers that reflected her dual nature as both warrior and scholar, filling the spaces with collections of scrolls, maps, architectural plans, and examples of craftsmanship from across the known world. Her quarters became a repository of knowledge that drew visitors from throughout the divine realm, as gods and goddesses found themselves consulting her growing library when faced with questions that required both broad understanding and precise detail. The steady stream of divine visitors provided Athena with additional opportunities to study the personalities and motivations of her fellow Olympians, while simultaneously establishing her reputation as a source of reliable counsel. Her relationship with Zeus developed along lines that satisfied both father and daughter, creating a partnership based on mutual respect rather than traditional parental dynamics. The king of the gods found in Athena the perfect advisor, one whose wisdom complemented his own authority without challenging its fundamental basis. She possessed the rare ability to offer counsel that enhanced his decisions rather than constraining them, providing strategic insights that allowed Zeus to navigate complex situations with greater confidence and effectiveness. Their conversations became legendary among the other gods, who marveled at the intellectual harmony between thunder and wisdom. The prophecy that had originally driven Zeus to such desperate measures proved to have been fulfilled in the most benevolent possible manner. Rather than producing a son who would challenge his authority, the union with Metis had created a daughter whose very existence strengthened and legitimized his reign. Athena's obvious devotion to wisdom and justice made her a natural supporter of cosmic order rather than its enemy, transforming what had once seemed like an existential threat into the greatest asset Zeus could have imagined. The irony of this outcome was not lost on the king of the gods, who began to understand that his fear of the prophecy had nearly prevented him from receiving its greatest gift. As seasons passed and Athena's presence became an accepted part of Olympian life, her influence began extending beyond the celestial realm to touch the mortal world below. Her interest in human civilization manifested through careful observation of the various tribes and city-states that dotted the Mediterranean landscape, each struggling to establish stable societies in the face of constant challenges from both natural disasters and human conflicts. The goddess perceived in these mortal endeavors a reflection of the same impulse toward order and improvement that characterized her own nature, creating a natural affinity between divine wisdom and human aspiration. The first mortals to attract Athena's direct attention were those who demonstrated exceptional skill in crafts and technologies that elevated human existence above mere survival. Potters who created vessels of unusual beauty and functionality. Weavers whose textiles displayed both artistic merit and practical excellence. Metalworkers who forged tools and weapons of superior design. Architects who conceived structures that combined aesthetic appeal with structural integrity, all found themselves blessed with insights and inspirations that seemed to flow from divine sources. These subtle interventions marked the beginning of Athena's role as patron of human achievement and technological advancement. Her approach to divine intervention differed markedly from that of other gods, who often acted through dramatic miracles or obvious supernatural displays. Athena preferred to work through enhancement of existing human capabilities, providing the spark of insight that allowed mortals to discover solutions to their own problems rather than simply imposing divine will upon mortal circumstances. This methodology reflected her understanding that true wisdom could not be simply granted, but must be earned through the application of enhanced understanding to real challenges and obstacles. The goddess also began to take interest in matters of governance and law, recognizing that human societies required more than individual excellence to achieve their full potential. She observed the various systems of leadership and justice that different communities had developed, noting both their strengths and their limitations with the analytical precision that characterized all her endeavors. Her studies revealed patterns of success and failure that transcended cultural boundaries, suggesting universal principles that could guide the development of more effective and equitable social structures. Kings and rulers who demonstrated genuine concern for the welfare of their subjects occasionally found themselves visited by dreams or visions that provided guidance on matters of policy and administration. These divine communications never appeared as direct commands, but rather as expanded perspectives that allowed mortal leaders to perceive the long-term consequences of their decisions with unusual clarity. The wisdom Athena shared through these subtle interventions helped establish precedents for just governance that would influence human civilization for countless generations. Her interest in warfare developed along parallel lines, focusing not on the brutal aspects of combat that appealed to gods like Ares, but rather on the strategic and tactical elements that could minimize destruction while achieving necessary objectives. She studied the various conflicts that erupted regularly among mortal communities, analyzing the factors that led to victory or defeat with the same methodical approach she applied to all subjects that captured her attention. Her insights into military strategy would eventually make her the preferred patron of commanders who sought to protect their people through skillful planning rather than mere aggression. The relationship between wisdom and warfare proved more complex and interconnected than many observers initially understood. Athena recognized that true strategic excellence required not only tactical knowledge, but also deep understanding of human psychology, political dynamics, economic factors, and cultural traditions that influenced how conflicts developed and resolved. A commander who possessed only technical military knowledge might win individual battles, but sustainable victory required the broader perspective that could only come from genuine wisdom applied to the comprehensive challenges of leadership. This holistic approach to both governance and warfare established Athena as a unique presence within the Olympian pantheon, occupying a niche that no other deity could effectively fill. While gods like Ares embodied the raw fury of combat, and deities such as Apollo represented the inspirational aspects of leadership, Athena alone combined practical wisdom with strategic insight in ways that address the full complexity of human civilization's greatest challenges. Her dual nature as both warrior and scholar reflected the fundamental truth that lasting achievement required both the courage to act and the wisdom to choose worthy objectives. The mortals who became most closely associated with Athena's patronage were those who demonstrated the rare combination of intellectual excellence and practical effectiveness that she valued above all other qualities. Heroes who relied purely on physical strength or magical assistance held little interest for her, while scholars who possessed knowledge but lacked the will to apply it constructively proved equally disappointing. The individuals who earned her direct support were those who used enhanced understanding to accomplish great deeds that benefited not only themselves, but the broader communities they served. As word of Athena's particular interests and methods spread through the mortal realm, temples and shrines began appearing in locations where her influence had been most strongly felt. These sacred spaces reflected her dual nature through architectural designs that combined elements associated with both warfare and learning, featuring arsenals alongside libraries, training grounds adjacent to centers of philosophical discussion. The priests and priestesses who served these temples developed rituals and ceremonies that honored both aspects of the goddess, recognizing that wisdom and courage were complementary virtues rather than competing alternatives. The olive tree, with its combination of practical utility and symbolic significance, became particularly associated with Athena's divine nature. This remarkable plant provided food, oil for lighting and cooking, wood for construction, and leaves for ceremonial purposes, embodying the principle of multi-purpose excellence that the goddess valued in all her endeavors. The cultivation and care of olive groves became a sacred duty among her followers, who understood that tending these trees reflected the same patient wisdom required for nurturing human civilization toward its highest potential. Human artisans who worked under Athena's patronage began developing techniques and creating objects that surpassed anything previously achieved by mortal craftspeople. Their pottery displayed unprecedented refinement in both form and function. Their textiles exhibited patterns of complexity and beauty that seemed almost supernatural in their perfection. Their metalwork achieved levels of durability and precision that would become legendary throughout the ancient world. These achievements were not the result of divine magic imposed upon human materials, but rather the natural consequence of enhanced human skill guided by supernatural insight. The goddess's influence on human warfare proved equally transformative, though in ways that emphasized protection and strategic superiority rather than increased destructive capability. Soldiers who fought under her guidance learned to coordinate their efforts with unprecedented precision. Commanders developed tactical innovations that allowed smaller forces to prevail against larger enemies, and city-states that honored her received inspiration for defensive fortifications that could withstand sieges that would have overwhelmed less well-prepared communities. These military innovations reflected Athena's fundamental preference for defensive rather than aggressive warfare, supporting those who fought to protect their homes, families, and communities while showing little favor toward those who initiated conflicts for conquest or plunder. Her strategic wisdom was freely available to leaders who sought to preserve peace through strength, but those who pursued war for its own sake found themselves facing opponents whose tactical sophistication seemed to increase in direct proportion to the aggressor's ambitions. The gradual spread of Athena's influence throughout the mortal realm created ripple effects that extended far beyond the immediate beneficiaries of her patronage. Communities that adopted the principles of wisdom-guided governance found themselves enjoying greater prosperity and stability than their neighbors, leading to the gradual diffusion of more effective administrative practices across wider geographic areas. Technological innovations developed under her guidance spread through trade networks and cultural exchange, raising the general level of human capability and comfort throughout the Mediterranean world. The transformation of human society under Athena's subtle guidance manifested most clearly in the emergence of institutions that balanced individual excellence with collective welfare. Schools of philosophy began appearing in cities where her influence was strongest, gathering places where mortals could engage in the kind of systematic inquiry that the goddess herself valued above all other intellectual pursuits. These academies differed from earlier centers of learning by emphasizing practical application alongside theoretical understanding, training minds that could both comprehend abstract principles and translate them into concrete solutions for real-world challenges. The curriculum developed within these institutions reflected Athena's comprehensive approach to wisdom, combining studies in mathematics, astronomy, and natural philosophy with training in rhetoric, ethics, and statecraft. Students learned to observe natural phenomena with scientific precision while simultaneously developing the communication skills necessary to share their discoveries with broader communities. This integration of scientific method with social responsibility created a new type of educated citizen, one capable of contributing to civilization's advancement through both individual achievement and collaborative effort. Architecture evolved under the goddess's influence toward forms that expressed mathematical harmony while serving practical human needs more effectively than previous designs. Temples, public buildings, and private residences began incorporating proportional relationships that pleased the eye while maximizing structural integrity and functional efficiency. The builders who developed these innovations understood that true architectural excellence required mastery of both aesthetic principles and engineering realities, creating structures that would endure through centuries while continuing to inspire those who encountered them. The legal systems that emerged in communities touched by Athena's wisdom displayed unprecedented sophistication in their approach to justice and social order. Rather than relying solely on traditional customs or the arbitrary decisions of rulers, these new frameworks incorporated systematic procedures for evaluating evidence, principles for ensuring fair treatment of all citizens regardless of social status, and mechanisms for adapting laws to changing circumstances while maintaining fundamental consistency. The judges who administered these systems learned to balance mercy with firmness, understanding that true justice required both compassion for human weakness and unwavering commitment to protecting the innocent. Trade and commerce flourished in regions where Athena's influence encouraged the development of standardized measures, reliable currency systems, and commercial practices that protected both buyers and sellers from exploitation. Merchants who operated according to these enhanced standards found themselves trusted throughout the Mediterranean world, their reputations for honest dealing opening markets that remained closed to less scrupulous competitors. The goddess understood that sustainable prosperity required mutual benefit rather than zero-sum competition, encouraging business practices that created wealth for entire communities rather than concentrating it among privileged elites. Agricultural techniques improved dramatically as farmers learned to apply systematic observation to the challenges of crop cultivation and livestock management. The careful study of soil conditions, seasonal patterns, and plant behavior led to innovations in irrigation, fertilization, and pest control that increased yields while reducing the labor required for food production. These improvements freed human resources for other pursuits, enabling the development of specialized crafts and intellectual disciplines that further elevated the overall quality of civilized life. The goddess's attention to detail extended to seemingly mundane aspects of daily existence, recognizing that genuine wisdom must address practical needs as well as elevated ideals. Improvements in food preparation, textile production, tool manufacturing, and household organization might appear trivial compared to grand achievements in philosophy or statecraft. But Athena understood that civilization's foundation rested upon the countless small improvements that made ordinary life more comfortable, efficient, and dignified for common people. Medical knowledge advanced as healers learned to combine empirical observation with systematic record keeping, documenting which treatments proved effective for specific ailments while developing theories to explain the underlying causes of disease and injury. The physicians who practiced under Athena's guidance approached their profession with the same methodical precision that characterized all endeavors she favored, maintaining detailed notes of their cases and sharing successful techniques with colleagues throughout the known world. Navigation and shipbuilding benefited from the goddess's influence as maritime communities developed more accurate methods for determining position at sea and constructing vessels capable of longer voyages under more challenging conditions. The mathematical principles underlying celestial navigation were refined through careful observation and calculation, while innovations in hull design and sail configuration allowed ships to carry larger cargoes more safely across greater distances. These improvements in transportation technology facilitated cultural exchange and economic development throughout the Mediterranean basin. The arts evolved under Athena's patronage toward forms that combined technical excellence with meaningful content, rejecting both empty virtuosity and crude emotional manipulation in favor of works that engaged both intellect and feeling through sophisticated craftsmanship applied to worthy subjects. Sculptors learned to capture not merely physical appearance, but psychological depth in their portraits, while painters developed techniques for representing complex narratives through carefully composed visual arrangements that rewarded careful study while remaining accessible to casual observers. Music and poetry flourished as composers and writers discovered how mathematical relationships could enhance emotional expression, creating works that achieved unprecedented beauty through the conscious application of harmonic principles and metrical structures. The bards and musicians who mastered these techniques found themselves capable of moving audiences to profound responses that combined aesthetic pleasure with moral instruction, fulfilling the goddess's vision of art as a vehicle for both entertainment and enlightenment. Athletic competitions developed beyond simple tests of physical prowess to become celebrations of human excellence that honored mental discipline alongside bodily strength. The training regimens developed for these contests emphasized the development of character as well as capability, producing competitors who embodied the classical ideal of sound mind in sound body. These events became focal points for community identity and cultural exchange, bringing together participants from diverse backgrounds in peaceful competition that celebrated a shared human potential. The influence of Athena's wisdom began manifesting in the emergence of individuals whose achievements transcended the normal boundaries of human capability. Heroes whose deeds would become legendary throughout the ancient world. These exceptional mortals shared certain characteristics that reflected the goddess's own nature, combining intellectual brilliance with moral courage, strategic thinking with decisive action, individual excellence with genuine concern for the welfare of others. Unlike heroes who derived their power from divine ancestry or magical gifts, those who earned Athena's direct patronage achieved greatness through the systematic application of enhanced human faculties to challenges that required both wisdom and valor. Their stories would inspire countless generations, demonstrating that mortals could achieve seemingly impossible objectives through the proper combination of careful planning, skillful execution, and unwavering dedication to worthy goals. The first of these legendary figures was Perseus, the son of Zeus and the mortal princess Danae, whose quest to slay the Gorgon Medusa exemplified the kind of undertaking that attracted Athena's attention and support. The challenge facing Perseus was not merely one of physical courage, though that was certainly required, but rather demanded the kind of strategic thinking that could devise solutions to problems that had defeated all previous attempts at resolution. The Gorgon Medusa possessed the power to transform anyone who looked directly upon her into stone, making conventional combat approaches utterly futile. Previous heroes who had attempted to destroy this monster had relied upon strength and courage alone, approaching their target with weapons drawn and eyes focused on their enemy, only to be turned into marble statues that served as grim warnings to future challengers. Perseus needed an entirely different approach, one that could overcome Medusa's deadly gaze without sacrificing the visual guidance necessary for accurate combat. Athena's assistance to Perseus took the form of gifts that reflected her dual nature as goddess of both wisdom and warfare, providing tools that enhanced the hero's natural capabilities rather than replacing them with supernatural substitutes. The polished bronze shield she gave him was crafted with a mirror-like surface that could reflect images with perfect clarity, allowing Perseus to observe Medusa's location and movements indirectly while avoiding her petrifying stare. This ingenious solution required the hero to master an entirely new form of combat, fighting while watching his opponent's reflection rather than looking directly at his target. The winged sandals provided by Athena enabled Perseus to approach Medusa from above, taking advantage of three-dimensional movement to avoid the limitations that had trapped previous attackers on the ground. The aerial approach required not only courage, but also precise timing and spatial awareness, as the hero would need to coordinate his descent with his sword stroke while maintaining proper orientation through reflected vision alone. This complex maneuver demanded the kind of mental discipline that Athena valued above all other heroic qualities. The magical wallet that could contain objects larger than itself represented practical problem-solving applied to the unique challenges of Perseus's quest. Medusa's severed head would retain its petrifying power even after death, making transportation extremely hazardous for anyone who attempted to carry it using conventional means. The expandable container solved this problem while also providing secure storage that prevented accidental exposure during the hero's return journey. Perseus's successful completion of his quest validated Athena's approach to heroic achievement, demonstrating that superior strategy could overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable through conventional methods. The hero's triumph resulted not from superior strength or divine intervention during the crucial moment of combat, but rather from careful preparation, innovative thinking, and the disciplined execution of a complex plan under extremely dangerous conditions. The aftermath of Perseus's victory revealed additional layers of wisdom in Athena's guidance, as the hero's possession of Medusa's head transformed him from a simple monster slayer into a figure of broader significance within the heroic tradition. The Gorgon's severed head became a powerful weapon that could be used to protect innocent people from other supernatural threats, while also serving as a deterrent against those who might seek to exploit the hero's temporary absence from his homeland. The rescue of Andromeda from the sea monster demonstrated how Perseus applied the lessons learned during his encounter with Medusa to new challenges that required adaptation rather than mere repetition of previous tactics. The princess had been chained to a rocky outcropping as a sacrifice to appease a creature that terrorized the coastal regions, and conventional rescue attempts had failed because the monster's aquatic nature made it nearly impossible for land-based warriors to engage effectively. Perseus approached this challenge with the same systematic analysis that had characterized his preparation for the Medusa quest, studying the monster's behavior patterns and identifying the optimal conditions for engagement. His use of aerial mobility allowed him to attack from angles that the sea creature could not easily defend against, while his possession of Medusa's head provided a decisive advantage that ensured swift victory rather than prolonged combat that might endanger the captive princess. The wedding of Perseus and Andromeda became the occasion for yet another demonstration of strategic thinking applied to social and political challenges, as rival suitors attempted to disrupt the ceremony through armed force. The hero's response to this threat illustrated how true wisdom could transform potentially tragic conflicts into opportunities for establishing more stable and just arrangements that benefited entire communities, rather than merely satisfying individual ambitions. The reign of Perseus as king demonstrated the long-term benefits of wisdom-guided leadership, as his kingdom became known throughout the ancient world for its prosperity, justice, and cultural achievements. The administrative systems he established reflected the same careful attention to detail that had characterized his heroic exploits, creating institutions that served their citizens effectively while maintaining the flexibility necessary for adaptation to changing circumstances. The legacy of Perseus extended beyond his individual achievements to encompass the broader influence his example exerted upon subsequent generations of heroes and leaders. Young men who heard the stories of his adventures understood that greatness could be achieved through careful preparation and intelligent application of available resources, rather than relying solely upon raw courage or divine intervention. This shift in heroic ideals reflected Athena's growing influence upon human civilization's understanding of excellence and achievement. The goddess's patronage of Perseus established patterns that would characterize her relationships with other legendary figures, emphasizing the development of human potential through enhanced understanding rather than supernatural substitution for natural capabilities. Heroes who sought her favor learned that they would receive guidance and appropriate tools, but that success would ultimately depend upon their own wisdom, courage, and skill in applying divine gifts to mortal challenges. The olive tree that Athena planted upon the Acropolis of Athens became the symbol of her growing relationship with that city, representing not only her victory in the contest with Poseidon for the role of patron deity, but also her vision of what human civilization could achieve under wise guidance. The tree's deep roots symbolized the stability that came from sound foundations, while its spreading branches represented the far-reaching benefits that flowed from decisions made with proper understanding of their long-term consequences. The contest between Athena and Poseidon for patronage of Athens revealed fundamental differences in their approaches to divine mortal relationships, with the sea god offering spectacular but temporary benefits, while the goddess provided gifts that would prove valuable across countless generations. Poseidon's saltwater spring demonstrated his power over the forces of nature, but offered little practical benefit to the city's inhabitants. Athena's olive tree, by contrast, would provide food, oil, wood, and ceremonial materials for as long as the city endured, embodying the principle of sustainable abundance through wise resource management. The citizens of Athens, when presented with these two divine offerings, demonstrated the kind of practical wisdom that would become characteristic of their city throughout its long and illustrious history. They recognized that while Poseidon's gift displayed impressive supernatural power, Athena's contribution addressed fundamental human needs in ways that would benefit countless future generations. This choice established Athens as a center of learning and rational thought, attracting individuals from across the Mediterranean world who valued intelligence and careful planning above mere spectacle and temporary advantage. The early development of Athens under Athena's patronage reflected her comprehensive approach to civilization building, as the city began implementing innovations in governance, education, and urban planning that would serve as models for communities throughout the known world. The goddess understood that sustainable prosperity required more than individual excellence, demanding the creation of systems and institutions that could maintain their effectiveness across multiple generations while adapting to changing circumstances and challenges. The legal framework that emerged in Athens represented a revolutionary departure from traditional approaches to justice and social order, incorporating principles of equality before the law that transcended conventional distinctions of birth and wealth. Citizens learned to evaluate evidence systematically rather than relying upon emotional appeals or personal connections, while judges developed procedures for ensuring fair treatment that protected both accusers and defendants from the arbitrary exercise of power by those in authority. The educational systems established under Athena's guidance emphasized the development of critical thinking alongside practical skills, preparing young Athenians to participate effectively in both civic life and economic activity. Students learned to question assumptions and examine evidence with the same methodical approach that characterized the goddess's own intellectual processes, developing minds capable of independent analysis while remaining respectful of legitimate authority and established wisdom. Architecture flourished as Athenian builders learned to combine aesthetic beauty with structural integrity, creating public buildings and private residences that expressed mathematical harmony while serving practical human needs more effectively than previous designs. The Parthenon, constructed in honor of Athena herself, embodied these principles through its perfect proportions and innovative engineering solutions, becoming a symbol not only of divine devotion but also of human capability elevated through supernatural inspiration. The goddess's influence extended into the realm of artistic expression, where painters, sculptors, and craftspeople developed techniques that achieved unprecedented levels of refinement and sophistication. Their works combined technical mastery with meaningful content, avoiding both empty virtuosity and crude emotional manipulation in favor of creations that engaged intellect and feeling through carefully considered approaches to form and subject matter. Athenian pottery became renowned throughout the ancient world for its combination of functional excellence and decorative beauty, with vessels that served practical household needs while displaying artistic merit that transformed everyday objects into expressions of cultural achievement. The geometric patterns and narrative scenes that adorned these pieces reflected mathematical principles applied to visual design, creating works that rewarded careful study while remaining accessible to casual observers. Textile production achieved similar heights of excellence as weavers learned to create fabrics that combined durability with aesthetic appeal, developing dyeing techniques and pattern-making methods that produced cloth coveted by wealthy individuals throughout the Mediterranean basin. The workshops where these textiles were created became centers of innovation where traditional methods were constantly refined through systematic experimentation and careful observation of results. Metalworking advanced dramatically as Athenian smiths mastered techniques for creating tools, weapons, and decorative objects that surpassed anything previously achieved by mortal craftspeople. Their bronze work displayed precision and artistry that seemed almost supernatural in its perfection, while their innovations in ironworking provided farmers and builders with implements that dramatically increased productivity and effectiveness. The military forces of Athens developed tactical sophistication that allowed them to prevail against enemies who possessed superior numbers or resources, employing strategic thinking and coordinated maneuvers that maximized their advantages while minimizing their vulnerabilities. Athenian commanders learned to study their opponents systematically, identifying weaknesses and developing specific approaches tailored to exploit particular circumstances rather than relying upon standard formations and conventional tactics. Naval warfare became an Athenian specialty as shipbuilders and sailors collaborated to develop vessels and techniques that dominated Mediterranean sea lanes for centuries. Their triremes combined speed, maneuverability, and fighting capability in designs that reflected the same attention to optimization that characterized all endeavors undertaken under Athena's guidance, creating fleets capable of projecting Athenian influence far beyond their homeland's geographic boundaries. Trade and commerce flourished as Athenian merchants developed reputations for honest dealing and reliable service that opened markets throughout the known world. Their success stemmed not from aggressive competition or exploitative practices, but rather from systematic approaches to quality control and customer service that created lasting relationships built upon mutual benefit and trust. The philosophical schools that emerged in Athens attracted students from across the civilized world, offering systematic approaches to understanding existence that combined logical reasoning with empirical observation. These academies differed from earlier centers of learning by emphasizing practical application alongside theoretical investigation, training minds capable of both comprehending abstract principles and translating them into concrete solutions for real-world challenges. Mathematical knowledge advanced through careful study of geometric relationships and numerical patterns, leading to discoveries that found immediate application in architecture, engineering, and navigation. Athenian mathematicians learned to express abstract relationships through visual demonstrations and practical examples, making complex concepts accessible to students while maintaining rigorous standards of logical proof and verification. Astronomical observation became increasingly sophisticated as Athenian scholars developed instruments and techniques for tracking celestial movements with unprecedented accuracy. Their discoveries improved navigation and calendar keeping while also contributing to theoretical understanding of cosmic relationships that would influence scientific thought for millennia to come. Medical practice evolved towards systematic approaches that combined empirical observation with theoretical frameworks for understanding disease and injury. Athenian physicians maintained detailed records of their cases, documenting which treatments proved effective while developing explanatory models that could guide future therapeutic decisions based upon accumulated experience and rational analysis. The influence of Athenian culture began spreading throughout the Mediterranean world as other communities adopted innovations and practices that had proven successful in the goddess's favored city. This cultural diffusion occurred through trade relationships, diplomatic contacts, and voluntary imitation rather than military conquest, demonstrating the attractive power of wisdom guided civilization over less sophisticated alternatives. Colonial settlements established by Athens carried these cultural achievements to distant shores, creating networks of related communities that shared common values and approaches while adapting to local conditions and opportunities. These colonies served as centers for further innovation and cultural development, extending Athena's influence far beyond the geographic boundaries of her primary sanctuary. The festivals and religious observances that developed in Athens honored both the goddess's martial and intellectual aspects, recognizing that wisdom and courage represented complementary rather than competing virtues. The Panathenaea, the greatest of these celebrations, combined athletic competitions with artistic displays and intellectual contests, creating comprehensive demonstrations of human excellence that inspired participants and observers alike. The peplos, the sacred garment woven for Athena's cult statue, represented the pinnacle of textile artistry and religious devotion combined, requiring years of preparation and the collaboration of the city's most skilled craftswomen. The intricate patterns and narrative scenes incorporated into this magnificent creation told stories of divine favor and human achievement, serving as both artistic masterpiece and theological statement about the relationship between mortal effort and supernatural inspiration. Religious processions that carried the peplos to the Acropolis became occasions for the entire community to demonstrate its unity and shared commitment to the principles that Athena represented. Citizens from all social classes participated in these ceremonies, which emphasized collective achievement rather than individual prominence, while providing opportunities for public recognition of exceptional service to the community. The treasury of Athens, enriched through wise governance and successful commercial activity, funded public works projects that benefited all citizens while providing employment opportunities for skilled craftsmen and laborers. These undertakings reflected Athena's understanding that prosperity should be shared rather than concentrated, creating visible improvements in the quality of urban life while demonstrating the practical benefits of wisdom-guided administration. Public health initiatives included the construction of aqueducts and sewage systems that provided clean water and sanitation services throughout the city, dramatically reducing disease and mortality while improving the general comfort and dignity of daily existence. These engineering achievements required sophisticated understanding of hydraulics and urban planning, knowledge that Athenian architects and engineers developed through systematic study and practical experimentation. The Agora, the central marketplace and civic center of Athens, became a model for urban design that balanced commercial activity with social interaction and political participation. Its layout facilitated efficient exchange of goods and services while providing spaces for public discussion and democratic deliberation, embodying Athena's vision of civilization as a collaborative enterprise that served both individual and collective needs. Libraries and archives established in Athens preserved knowledge and cultural achievements for future generations, recognizing that wisdom accumulated slowly through the efforts of many individuals over extended periods. The systematic organization and maintenance of these collections required specialized skills and dedicated personnel, creating new categories of professional service that contributed to the city's intellectual development. Schools of rhetoric and oratory trained citizens in the arts of persuasion and public speaking, skills essential for effective participation in democratic governance and legal proceedings. These institutions emphasized ethical application of communication techniques, teaching students to pursue truth and justice rather than mere victory in argument or litigation. The democratic institutions that developed in Athens under Athena's guidance represented revolutionary approaches to governance that distributed political authority among citizens rather than concentrating it in hereditary rulers or wealthy elites. These systems required extensive education and civic participation to function effectively, creating strong incentives for intellectual development and moral character among the population. Jury service became both a civic duty and an educational opportunity, as citizens learned to evaluate evidence systematically while applying legal principles to complex situations that required careful judgment and moral reasoning. The procedures developed for these processes influenced legal systems throughout the ancient world, establishing precedents for fair treatment that protected both individual rights and community welfare. The theatrical performances that emerged in Athens combined entertainment with moral instruction, presenting stories that explored fundamental questions about human nature, divine justice, and social responsibility. Dramatists learned to craft narratives that engaged audiences emotionally while encouraging reflection upon ethical issues and philosophical problems that affected both individual choices and collective policies. Comedy and tragedy served different but complementary functions within Athenian cultural life, with humorous works providing social criticism and release from tension, while serious dramas explored profound themes that demanded thoughtful consideration. Both genres contributed to public discourse by presenting alternative perspectives on contemporary issues while maintaining artistic excellence that elevated the quality of popular entertainment. Athletic training and competition reflected Athena's appreciation for physical excellence combined with mental discipline, as participants learned to develop their bodily capabilities while maintaining the character traits necessary for fair play and gracious acceptance of both victory and defeat. The gymnasium became an institution that served educational as well as recreational functions, providing spaces where young men could receive instruction in philosophy and literature alongside physical conditioning. Women's education, while more limited than that available to male citizens, nevertheless received attention that was unusual for its time, reflecting Athena's own nature as a goddess who had achieved excellence in traditionally masculine domains while maintaining feminine dignity and wisdom. The skills taught to Athenian women included not only domestic arts, but also mathematical knowledge necessary for household management and business activities. Religious festivals provided opportunities for women to participate in public life through roles that honored their contributions to family and community welfare, while the mystery cults offered spiritual experiences that transcended conventional gender limitations. The priestesses who served Athena's temples received extensive training that prepared them for leadership responsibilities within religious institutions and advisory roles in civic affairs. The goddess's influence upon Athenian military organization emphasized discipline and coordination rather than individual heroism, developing fighting units that could execute complex maneuvers while maintaining cohesion under challenging conditions. This approach required extensive training and mutual trust among soldiers, qualities that strengthened social bonds throughout the community while enhancing military effectiveness. Fortifications designed under Athena's guidance combined defensive strength with architectural beauty, creating walls and towers that protected the city while expressing civic pride and cultural achievement. The engineering principles underlying these structures influenced fortress design throughout the Mediterranean world, establishing Athens as a center of military architecture as well as artistic excellence. Naval supremacy allowed Athens to establish trading networks that brought prosperity to allies while projecting Athenian cultural influence across vast geographic areas. The merchant vessels and warships that carried this expansion were marvels of engineering that combined speed, cargo capacity, and seaworthiness in designs that remained unsurpassed for centuries. Diplomatic achievements reflected Athenian mastery of negotiation and alliance building, skills that enabled a relatively small city-state to exercise influence far beyond what its population and territory might have suggested. These successes stemmed from consistent policies based upon mutual benefit rather than exploitation, creating relationships that endured through changing political circumstances. The intellectual achievements of Athens attracted scholars and students from throughout the known world, establishing the city as a center of learning that influenced developments in philosophy, science, mathematics, and literature for centuries. The concentration of brilliant minds in this environment created opportunities for collaborative research and creative synthesis that accelerated progress in multiple fields simultaneously. Innovation in agriculture and food production supported population growth while maintaining sustainable relationships with the natural environment, reflecting Athena's understanding that long-term prosperity required careful stewardship of available resources. Athenian farmers developed crop rotation techniques and soil management practices that maintained fertility while increasing yields. The olive groves that surrounded Athens became symbols of the goddess's enduring gift to human civilization, providing not only immediate economic benefits, but also representing the principle of patient cultivation that characterized all worthy achievements. The care and maintenance of these trees required knowledge passed down through generations, creating traditions that connected past wisdom with present prosperity. Artistic traditions developed in Athens influenced cultural development throughout the Mediterranean basin as other communities adopted Athenian innovations in sculpture, painting, and decorative arts. The combination of technical excellence with meaningful subject matter established standards for aesthetic achievement that guided creative endeavors for millennia. The pantheon of heroes associated with Athena's patronage continued to grow as new champions emerged, who embodied the qualities she valued most highly, demonstrating that heroic achievement remained possible for mortals who combined courage with wisdom and individual excellence with service to worthy causes. These legendary figures would inspire countless generations while establishing precedents for the kinds of undertakings that could earn divine support and lasting fame. The hero Bellerophon represented another magnificent example of how Athena's guidance could transform seemingly impossible challenges into opportunities for demonstrating the highest forms of mortal excellence. The young prince of Corinth had been falsely accused of attempting to seduce the wife of King Proetus, leading to his exile and eventual arrival at the court of King Iobates in Lycia. The Lycian monarch, bound by laws of hospitality, yet compelled to satisfy his allies' demand for vengeance, devised what he believed would be a fatal mission that would eliminate Bellerophon while preserving the appearance of honor and justice. The task assigned to the hero involved destroying the Chimera, a monstrous creature that terrorized the Lycian countryside with its unique combination of deadly attributes. This beast possessed the head of a lion, the body of a goat, and the tail of a serpent, breathing fire that could incinerate anything within its considerable range. The Chimera's hybrid nature made conventional combat approaches utterly futile, as strategies effective against one type of creature proved useless against its other aspects. Previous warriors who had attempted to destroy this monster had perished quickly, their charred remains serving as grim testimony to the futility of relying upon ordinary weapons and tactics. Athena's intervention in Bellerophon's quest took a form that perfectly exemplified her preference for enhancing human capability rather than replacing it with divine power. Rather than providing magical weapons or supernatural protection, the goddess guided the hero toward a solution that required the domestication and partnership of Pegasus, the winged horse that had sprung from Medusa's blood following Perseus's victory over the Gorgon. This magnificent creature possessed the aerial mobility necessary to overcome the Chimera's ground-based advantages while remaining beyond the reach of its deadly flame breath. The process of taming Pegasus demanded patience, skill, and understanding that went far beyond simple animal handling techniques. The winged horse was not merely a larger version of ordinary equines, but rather a creature whose divine heritage made it responsive only to riders who demonstrated exceptional character and purpose. Bellerophon needed to prove himself worthy through actions that revealed his moral integrity and heroic potential before Pegasus would accept his guidance and partnership in the dangerous mission ahead. Athena's guidance took the form of dreams and inspirations that taught Bellerophon the proper approaches to winning Pegasus's trust and cooperation. The hero learned to offer gifts of honey and grain while speaking in gentle tones that conveyed respect rather than domination, gradually building a relationship based upon mutual understanding rather than forceful subjugation. This process required weeks of patient effort, during which Bellerophon demonstrated the kind of persistence and wisdom that the goddess valued above all other heroic qualities. The partnership between hero and winged horse that eventually developed represented a perfect synthesis of mortal determination and divine capability, creating a combined force that could address challenges neither could have overcome independently. Bellerophon provided strategic thinking and tactical expertise, while Pegasus offered mobility and perspective that transformed the entire nature of the conflict with the Chimera. Together, they embodied Athena's vision of how supernatural assistance should enhance rather than replace human excellence. The battle with the Chimera demonstrated the effectiveness of wisdom-guided preparation, combined with innovative tactical approaches that exploited the monster's weaknesses while avoiding its strengths. Flying high above the creature's flame breath, Bellerophon used arrows tipped with lead to attack the beast's vulnerable areas while remaining beyond the range of its claws and fangs. The lead tips melted from the Chimera's internal heat, creating molten metal that blocked the creature's air passages and ultimately caused its destruction through suffocation rather than external wounds. This victory established Bellerophon as one of the greatest heroes of his generation, while simultaneously validating Athena's approach to divine intervention in mortal affairs. The success resulted not from supernatural weapons or magical protection, but rather from careful analysis of the challenge, innovative problem solving, and the disciplined execution of a complex plan under extremely dangerous conditions. The hero's triumph demonstrated that seemingly impossible obstacles could be overcome through the proper combination of courage, intelligence, and divine guidance. The aftermath of Bellerophon's victory revealed additional dimensions of Athena's wisdom, as the hero's newfound fame and status created opportunities for further service to civilization, while also presenting temptations that could lead to his downfall. King Iobates, impressed by the young man's achievement, offered him marriage to his daughter and succession to the Lycian throne, recognizing that such exceptional capability deserved appropriate reward and recognition. This offer represented the kind of earthly success that many heroes sought, providing wealth, power, and social position that would ensure comfort and influence for the remainder of his mortal existence. However, Bellerophon's response to these rewards tested his character in ways that proved even more challenging than his combat with the Chimera. The hero's growing pride in his achievements began to overshadow the wisdom and humility that had originally earned Athena's favor, leading him to believe that his successes resulted solely from his own abilities, rather than from the combination of mortal effort and divine guidance that had actually produced his victories. This psychological transformation represented a common danger faced by heroes who achieved great deeds, as success could easily lead to the kind of hubris that alienated divine support and ultimately caused destruction. Athena observed Bellerophon's changing attitude with the patient attention she devoted to all her favored mortals, recognizing both the natural human tendency toward pride and the potential consequences of allowing such feelings to develop unchecked. Her response to the hero's growing arrogance took the form of subtle warnings and gentle corrections designed to restore his perspective without diminishing his confidence or ability to serve worthy causes. The goddess understood that excessive intervention could undermine the very independence and self-reliance that made mortals capable of genuine heroism, requiring a delicate balance between guidance and freedom. The hero's ultimate downfall came when his pride led him to attempt a direct assault upon Mount Olympus itself, believing that his partnership with Pegasus entitled him to claim a place among the gods without earning such elevation through appropriate service and sacrifice. This act of supreme hubris violated the fundamental boundaries between mortal and divine existence, demonstrating a complete loss of the wisdom that had originally made Bellerophon worthy of supernatural support and assistance. Zeus's response to this presumptuous invasion of the celestial realm took the form of a gadfly that stung Pegasus at the crucial moment of the assault, causing the winged horse to rear and throw his rider back toward the earth below. Bellerophon's fall represented not merely physical descent, but also spiritual collapse, as his separation from Pegasus symbolized the loss of divine favor that inevitably followed such displays of arrogance and disrespect for cosmic order. The hero's subsequent wandering as a blind and lame beggar served as a powerful reminder that mortal achievements, however impressive, remained dependent upon maintaining proper relationships with divine powers and cosmic principles. Bellerophon's tragedy illustrated the importance of humility and gratitude in preserving the kind of character that could sustain heroic achievement across extended periods, demonstrating that wisdom required not only intelligence and courage, but also accurate understanding of one's place within the larger scheme of existence. Athena's relationship with Jason and the Argonauts revealed different aspects of her approach to divine guidance, as this quest involved collaborative effort among multiple heroes rather than individual achievement. The mission to retrieve the Golden Fleece from Colchis required not only personal courage and skill, but also leadership capability and strategic coordination that could unite diverse personalities and talents in pursuit of a common objective. The goddess recognized that this expedition offered opportunities to demonstrate how wisdom could enhance group effectiveness while also providing individual participants with chances for personal growth and development. The construction of the Argo itself became an occasion for displaying the kind of technological innovation that Athena consistently encouraged among her mortal followers. The ship represented advances in naval architecture that combined traditional shipbuilding techniques with experimental features designed to meet the specific challenges of the proposed voyage. The talking beam incorporated into the vessel's prow, crafted from wood taken from Zeus's sacred oak at Dodona, provided both practical guidance and symbolic connection to divine authority that would prove essential during the expedition's most dangerous moments. Athena's direct contributions to the Argo's construction included suggestions for design modifications that enhanced the ship's seaworthiness while also improving its capacity for carrying the supplies and equipment necessary for such an extended voyage. Her recommendations reflected deep understanding of both nautical engineering and the practical requirements of long-distance exploration, demonstrating how divine wisdom could address technical challenges that exceeded ordinary mortal knowledge without simply imposing supernatural solutions. The selection and preparation of the Argonauts themselves revealed Athena's appreciation for diverse forms of excellence and her understanding that complex undertakings required participants with complementary rather than identical capabilities. The expedition included heroes renowned for physical strength, others valued for their specialized skills, and individuals whose contributions involved intellectual capabilities that proved as crucial as martial prowess. This diversity created opportunities for mutual learning and collaborative achievement that enhanced each participant's individual development while contributing to the mission's overall success. The goddess's guidance during the voyage took forms that encouraged the Argonauts to develop their own problem-solving abilities, rather than simply following divine instructions. When the expedition encountered the clashing rocks that destroyed ships attempting to pass between them, Athena's assistance came through inspiration that led the heroes to devise their own solution using a dove to test the timing of the rock's movements. This approach allowed them to demonstrate courage and intelligence while also receiving the supernatural support necessary to overcome obstacles that would have been impossible to surmount through purely mortal efforts. The challenges faced in Colchis itself required diplomatic skill and cultural understanding alongside heroic capability, as Jason needed to navigate complex relationships with King Ates and his daughter Medea while pursuing his primary objective of securing the Golden Fleece. Athena's guidance helped the hero recognize that success would require winning allies rather than simply overpowering opposition, leading to the romantic relationship with Medea that provided access to magical knowledge and local support, essential for completing the mission. The trials imposed by King Ates tested different aspects of heroic capability, requiring Jason to demonstrate not only physical courage, but also tactical intelligence and adaptability under pressure. The task of yoking fire-breathing bulls and using them to plow a field demanded both fearlessness and practical understanding of animal behavior, while the challenge of sowing dragon's teeth and defeating the armed warriors that sprouted from them required strategic thinking that could turn apparent disadvantages into opportunities for victory. Medea's assistance in these trials represented the kind of collaborative relationship that Athena consistently encouraged, demonstrating how individual excellence could be enhanced through partnership with others who possessed complementary knowledge and abilities. The magical ointments and tactical advice that the sorceress provided enabled Jason to survive challenges that would have been fatal without such support, while her own development through involvement in heroic endeavor illustrated the transformative potential of service to worthy causes. The retrieval of the Golden Fleece itself required confronting the sleepless dragon that guarded this precious artifact, presenting a challenge that combined physical danger with the need for supernatural intervention. Medea's use of sleep-inducing herbs to overcome the dragon's vigilance demonstrated how magical knowledge could serve heroic purposes when applied by individuals with appropriate moral character and commitment to just objectives. The success of this approach validated Athena's belief that wisdom could find solutions to problems that seemed to require purely supernatural resolution. The return voyage of the Argonauts presented new challenges that tested the expedition's unity and leadership under conditions of stress and uncertainty. The heroes faced not only natural hazards and hostile populations, but also internal tensions that arose from extended collaboration under difficult circumstances. Athena's guidance during this phase emphasized the importance of maintaining group cohesion while also respecting individual contributions and concerns, demonstrating how effective leadership could preserve team effectiveness even when facing unprecedented challenges. The tragic consequences that eventually befell Jason and Medea illustrated the complex moral dimensions of heroic achievement, as their initial success in retrieving the Golden Fleece became overshadowed by subsequent events that revealed character flaws and ethical failures. Athena's response to these developments reflected her understanding that divine support could not prevent heroes from making choices that violated moral principles, though it could provide opportunities for redemption and learning even in the aftermath of serious mistakes. The story of Theseus represented perhaps the most comprehensive example of Athena's approach to heroic development, as this hero's career encompassed multiple adventures that demonstrated different aspects of wisdom-guided achievement. The son of King Aegeus began his heroic journey by choosing to travel from Troezen to Athens by the dangerous overland route, rather than the safer sea passage, deliberately seeking opportunities to prove himself through confronting the bandits and monsters that terrorized travelers along the coastal road. This decision reflected the kind of moral courage that Athena valued most highly, as Theseus chose to accept greater personal risk in order to serve the broader good by eliminating threats to innocent travelers. His systematic approach to clearing the road of its various dangers demonstrated strategic thinking applied to multiple challenges, with each victory providing experience and confidence that prepared him for increasingly difficult confrontations. The encounter with Procrustes, the bandit who forced travelers to fit his iron bed by either stretching them or cutting off their limbs, provided Theseus with an opportunity to demonstrate the principle of proportional justice that characterized wisdom-guided heroism. Rather than simply killing this criminal through conventional combat, the hero applied Procrustes' own methods to the bandit himself, illustrating how appropriate punishment could both satisfy justice and serve as an educational example for others who might consider similar crimes. The defeat of the Minotaur in the Labyrinth of Crete represented Theseus's most famous achievement and demonstrated the highest level of collaboration between human capability and divine guidance that Athena's methods could produce. The monster itself was merely one aspect of a complex challenge that included navigating the maze that confined it, surviving the encounter with a creature that had killed all previous challengers, and finding a way to escape from the labyrinth after completing the mission. Ariadne's assistance in providing thread to mark the path through the labyrinth illustrated how heroic achievement often required accepting help from unexpected sources while maintaining primary responsibility for success or failure. The princess's romantic interest in Theseus motivated her betrayal of her own father's interests, creating moral complexities that would later influence the hero's decisions and ultimately contribute to tragic consequences that demonstrated the interconnected nature of heroic choices. The actual confrontation with the Minotaur required not only physical courage, but also tactical intelligence that could overcome a creature whose strength and ferocity exceeded normal human capability. Theseus's victory resulted from his ability to use the monster's own aggressive impulses against it, employing misdirection and timing that allowed human agility and intelligence to triumph over brute force and supernatural power. The escape from Crete and the subsequent abandonment of Ariadne on the island of Naxos revealed character flaws in Theseus that would influence his later career and ultimate fate. The hero's decision to leave behind the woman who had made his victory possible reflected a failure to maintain the kind of gratitude and loyalty that Athena considered essential for sustained heroic achievement. This moral lapse created consequences that would eventually contribute to his father's death and his own downfall. The establishment of democratic institutions in Athens under Theseus's leadership demonstrated how heroic capability could be applied to political and social challenges that required different forms of excellence than those needed for monster slaying and adventure. The king's willingness to share power with his citizens reflected wisdom that recognized the limitations of individual authority, while also understanding how collective decision-making could produce better outcomes than autocratic rule. The reforms implemented during Theseus's reign included legal innovations that protected individual rights while maintaining social order, economic policies that encourage trade and prosperity while preventing excessive inequality, and military organizations that could defend the city while also projecting Athenian influence throughout the region. These achievements required sustained effort and attention to detail that demonstrated how heroic energy could be channeled into constructive purposes that benefited entire communities. The friendship between Theseus and Pirate House illustrated both the potential benefits and dangers of heroic partnerships, as their mutual encouragement led to increasingly audacious adventures that eventually exceeded the boundaries of appropriate mortal ambition. Their decision to seek divine wives by attempting to abduct daughters of Zeus represented the kind of hubris that inevitably attracted divine punishment, regardless of the previous achievements that might have earned them fame and respect. The failed attempt to rescue Persephone from the underworld demonstrated how even legitimate, heroic partnerships could lead to disaster when they pursued objectives that violated fundamental cosmic principles. The imprisonment of both heroes in Hades' realm served as a powerful reminder that mortal capability, however exceptional, remained subject to divine authority and cosmic law that could not be challenged without serious consequences. Heracles' eventual rescue of Theseus, while leaving Pirate House behind, illustrated the complex moral calculations that sometimes governed divine justice, as the gods apparently distinguished between heroes whose actions stemmed from misguided loyalty and those whose motivations involved more serious character flaws. This selective mercy demonstrated that even serious mistakes could sometimes be forgiven when they resulted from virtues carried to excess rather than fundamental moral corruption. The later career of Theseus revealed how heroic achievement could be sustained across extended periods through continued attention to wisdom and moral development, though it also illustrated the challenges that aging heroes faced as their physical capabilities declined while their responsibilities and expectations remained constant. The king's eventual exile from Athens reflected both political changes that reduced his effectiveness as a leader and personal choices that had gradually eroded his support among the citizens he had once served so successfully. The death of Theseus on the island of Scyros represented a reminder that even the greatest heroes remained subject to mortality, and that their legacies depended ultimately upon the institutions and traditions they had established rather than their personal survival. The democratic principles and cultural achievements that had flourished under his guidance continued to influence Athenian development long after his death, demonstrating how wisdom-guided leadership could create lasting benefits that transcended individual lifespans. The goddess's relationship with Odysseus revealed yet another dimension of her approach to heroic guidance, as this hero's primary challenges involved intellectual rather than physical obstacles that required sustained cleverness and adaptability over an extended period. The Trojan War and its aftermath provided Odysseus with opportunities to demonstrate the kind of strategic thinking that Athena valued above all other forms of excellence, establishing him as the supreme example of wisdom applied to complex and changing circumstances. The role that Odysseus played in the development and execution of the Trojan horse strategy illustrated how individual brilliance could serve collective objectives while also advancing personal goals and ambitions. The concept of using deception to overcome military obstacles that had proven insurmountable through direct assault reflected exactly the kind of innovative thinking that characterized Athena's preferred approaches to seemingly impossible challenges. The construction of the wooden horse required not only creative engineering, but also psychological insight into enemy motivations and decision-making processes, demonstrating how effective strategy must combine technical capability with understanding of human nature. The success of this stratagem validated the principle that superior intelligence could overcome advantages in numbers, fortifications, and resources when applied with sufficient creativity and determination. The long journey home from Troy provided Odysseus with a series of challenges that tested different aspects of his character while also revealing the complex relationship between divine favor and mortal choices. Each adventure during the voyage demonstrated how wisdom could find solutions to supernatural obstacles, while also illustrating the consequences of decisions that violated moral principles or ignored divine warnings and guidance. The encounter with the Cyclops Polyphemus revealed both the strengths and limitations of Odysseus's approach to problem solving, as his cleverness enabled him to escape from certain death, while his pride in his own intelligence led to mistakes that created long-term consequences for himself and his companions. The hero's decision to reveal his true identity to the blinded giant reflected the kind of hubris that could transform victory into ultimate defeat. The curse that Poseidon placed upon Odysseus as a result of his treatment of the Cyclops illustrated how even justified actions could have unintended consequences when they were performed without proper consideration of their broader implications. The hero's decade-long struggle to return home demonstrated that wisdom required not only tactical cleverness, but also strategic patience and moral consistency that could sustain effort across extended periods of hardship and temptation. The various temptations that Odysseus encountered during his journey provided opportunities for demonstrating different forms of self-control and moral discipline that complemented his intellectual capabilities. His resistance to the siren's song, his escape from Circe's enchantments, and his eventual rejection of Calypso's offer of immortality all illustrated how true heroism required the ability to sacrifice immediate pleasures for long-term objectives and higher principles. The restoration of order in Ithaca upon Odysseus's return demonstrated how wisdom-guided leadership could address complex social and political problems that had developed during periods of ineffective governance. The hero's systematic approach to eliminating the suitors who had plagued his household during his absence reflected both strategic thinking and moral judgment that could distinguish between appropriate and excessive responses to challenging circumstances. The reunion between Odysseus and Penelope represented the culmination of parallel journeys that had tested both spouses in different ways, while ultimately validating their shared commitment to principles that transcended immediate convenience or advantage. Their mutual recognition through subtle tests and confirmations illustrated how true partnership required not only emotional connection, but also intellectual compatibility and moral alignment. The establishment of lasting peace in Ithaca required Odysseus to demonstrate that his heroic capabilities could be applied to constructive governance rather than merely destructive combat, showing how wisdom could create stability and prosperity rather than simply overcoming obstacles and enemies. The king's success in this final challenge validated Athena's belief that true heroism involved building as well as conquering. The goddess's patronage of these various heroes established patterns and precedents that would influence Western concepts of excellence and achievement for millennia to come, demonstrating how divine guidance could enhance rather than replace human capability, while also illustrating the moral and practical requirements for sustaining heroic achievement across extended periods and diverse challenges. The legacy of Athena's heroic champions created ripples that extended far beyond individual achievements, establishing principles of excellence that would guide human civilization toward unprecedented heights of cultural and intellectual development. As generations passed and new challenges emerged across the Mediterranean world, the goddess's influence manifested through institutions and traditions that embodied her vision of wisdom applied to the practical needs of mortal society. The concept of the hero evolved under her guidance from simple warrior champions who relied primarily upon physical prowess to complex figures who demonstrated mastery of multiple disciplines simultaneously. These enhanced ideals of heroic achievement required individuals who could serve as military leaders, political administrators, cultural innovators, and moral exemplars, all within the scope of single lifetimes dedicated to service and excellence. The schools that emerged in cities, touched by Athena's influence, began producing graduates whose capabilities transcended traditional boundaries between different forms of knowledge and skill. Young men learned to approach problems with systematic analysis while maintaining the flexibility necessary for creative solutions, developing minds that could perceive both immediate details and long-term patterns with equal clarity and precision. These educational innovations created new categories of public service as communities recognized the need for specialized administrators who could manage complex governmental functions with the same competence that master craftsmen brought to their technical disciplines. The emergence of professional civil servants marked a revolutionary development in human organization, establishing precedents for systematic governance that would influence political development throughout the ancient world. The goddess's attention to detail extended to seemingly mundane aspects of urban planning and infrastructure development, recognizing that true civilization required comprehensive attention to all elements that contributed to human comfort, safety, and dignity. Water systems, waste management, food distribution, and transportation networks all received careful consideration as essential components of communities worthy of divine favor and protection. Engineering achievements that resulted from this holistic approach to civic development included aqueducts that brought clean water across vast distances, roads that facilitated trade and communication between distant regions, and harbor facilities that could accommodate the increasingly sophisticated vessels that carried Mediterranean commerce to new levels of volume and reliability. The mathematical principles underlying these construction projects required advances in measurement, calculation, and design that pushed human knowledge toward new frontiers of precision and theoretical understanding. Architects learned to express aesthetic preferences through numerical relationships that satisfied both emotional responses and structural requirements, creating buildings that would inspire observers while serving practical needs across centuries of continuous use. The artistic traditions that flourished under Athena's patronage began incorporating symbolic elements that conveyed complex philosophical concepts through visual imagery accessible to observers, regardless of their educational background or social status. Sculptors developed techniques for representing abstract virtues through human forms that embodied idealized characteristics, creating works that functioned simultaneously as religious objects, artistic achievements, and educational tools. Painting evolved toward increased sophistication in depicting spatial relationships and emotional states, allowing artists to create narratives that could communicate moral lessons and cultural values through carefully composed visual arrangements. The development of perspective and proportion as systematic disciplines provided painters with tools for creating increasingly realistic representations while maintaining symbolic content that enriched meaning beyond mere surface appearance. The dramatic arts that emerged in Athena's favored cities combined entertainment with education in ways that made serious philosophical and ethical discussions accessible to broad audiences who might otherwise have had limited exposure to such concepts. Playwrights learned to embed complex moral questions within engaging stories that held viewers' attention while simultaneously challenging their assumptions and encouraging deeper reflection. Comedy served important social functions by providing safe outlets for criticism of established institutions and leaders, allowing communities to address problems and tensions through humor rather than direct confrontation that might have led to divisive conflicts. The satirical traditions that developed under this protection created valuable checks upon the abuse of authority while maintaining respect for legitimate governance and social order. Tragedy explored the consequences of moral choices and character flaws through stories that demonstrated how even exceptional individuals could face destruction when they violated fundamental principles or allowed personal weaknesses to overcome their better judgment. These dramatic presentations provided audiences with opportunities to contemplate serious issues within contexts that made abstract concepts concrete and emotionally compelling. The festivals that celebrated these theatrical performances became occasions for entire communities to gather and engage with ideas that transcended immediate practical concerns, creating shared cultural experiences that strengthened social bonds while elevating the intellectual climate of participating cities. The competitive aspects of these celebrations encouraged artistic innovation while maintaining standards of excellence that inspired continuous improvement. Religious observances evolved beyond simple worship toward comprehensive celebrations of human achievement that honored divine patrons through demonstrations of the capabilities they had helped develop among their mortal followers. The Panathenaic Games exemplified this approach by combining athletic competitions with artistic displays, intellectual contests, and ceremonial processions that showcased the full range of Athenian excellence. The Peplos procession that formed the climax of these festivities represented collaborative achievement on an unprecedented scale, requiring years of preparation and the coordination of countless individuals who contributed specialized skills to create a single magnificent expression of communal devotion. The garment itself became a masterpiece that incorporated the finest techniques of textile production with narrative elements that told the story of Athena's relationship with her chosen city. Craftsmen who participated in these collaborative projects learned to subordinate individual recognition to collective achievement while simultaneously developing their personal capabilities to the highest possible levels. This balance between individual excellence and group cooperation created new forms of artistic and technical innovation that exceeded what any single artisan could have accomplished working independently. The economic prosperity that resulted from these cultural developments enabled communities to support increasing numbers of citizens in specialized occupations that contributed to intellectual and artistic advancement rather than merely providing basic necessities. This diversification of economic activity created opportunities for innovation and improvement that accelerated progress across multiple domains simultaneously. Trade relationships that developed between cities, influenced by Athena's guidance, created networks of cultural exchange that spread innovations throughout the Mediterranean basin more rapidly than had been possible through earlier, more limited forms of contact. Merchants carried not only goods, but also ideas, techniques, and artistic styles that enriched the receiving communities while creating new opportunities for synthesis and development. The standardization of weights, measures, and currency systems facilitated this expanded commerce, while also providing foundations for more sophisticated mathematical and scientific investigations. The precision required for accurate measurement and calculation in commercial contexts created incentives for theoretical developments that would eventually contribute to advances in astronomy, engineering, and natural philosophy. Navigation techniques improved dramatically as seafaring communities developed more accurate methods for determining position and direction during extended voyages across open water. The mathematical principles underlying celestial navigation required systematic observation and theoretical understanding that contributed to broader advances in astronomical knowledge and timekeeping systems. Cartographic innovations that resulted from improved navigation created more accurate representations of geographic relationships, enabling better planning for both commercial ventures and military campaigns. The maps produced by communities under Athena's influence became valuable commodities that were sought throughout the ancient world for their combination of accuracy and artistic excellence. Agricultural techniques continued evolving toward greater productivity and sustainability as farmers learned to apply systematic observation and experimentation to the challenges of crop cultivation and livestock management. The innovations that resulted from this scientific approach to farming increased food production while reducing the labor required, freeing human resources for other pursuits that contributed to overall cultural development. And so we reach the end of our journey through the remarkable story of Athena, the gray-eyed goddess whose wisdom continues to illuminate the path of human achievement. As sleep now embraces you fully, let these final thoughts drift through your consciousness like gentle waves upon a moonlit shore. Her legacy lives on in every moment of thoughtful decision, every act of courageous wisdom, and every civilization that chooses knowledge over ignorance. Sweet dreams await you, guided by the eternal light of wisdom herself.